All right.
Let's do it.
Folks, this may be the only time and place in the country where we're talking about preserving our constitutional rights and civil rights and not canceling them. And this is a panel that I've been looking forward to being with for a long time. And we have with us Representative Byron. Look, I'm going to tell you, Byron, when I saw you in jeans, I was excited.
That's what I do.
It's needed in Congress, for sure. We have Doug Deason, my friend. We have Mark Walker, who's running for the Senate. We have Jim McLaughlin, who I enjoy that Irish brogue on occasion. But these are real down-to-earth people and people that have been on the front lines of elections. And some have analyzed data. Some are political strategists. Some are running for office. And there are others like myself that gets to sit back and gets to talk about criminal justice issues on, John Bachman's show on Newsmax or on Bill O'Reilly. And now we all come together because we have a passion and an understanding. And what is that understanding? It's about the fact that it is a different day and age for conservatives who are running for office and the criminal justice system. So we're going to kick this off. I'm going to start with you, Representative. Tell me, what does conservative, candidate have to do in order to get elected when it comes to dealing with criminal justice issues?
I think that's a great question. What you really have to do is make two very important acknowledgments. The first is that we must have a criminal justice system that actually punishes and completes the punishment of people who do wrong. But here's the second part. Hold on, don't clap for me yet. Because here's the second part.
There's a second part.
The second part is it also has to acknowledge that people who have broken our laws are still American citizens. And there must be a pathway, a conduit, for them to come back into society and be citizens once more. Now you can clap. There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because conservatives are about redemption. We are about, remembering that the soul and the human being has worth and it has value. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that fact. Doug, you spent a lot of time working in elections. Tell us what you're seeing in terms of how is it changing with conservatives in criminal justice issues.
I think it's, I'm from Texas, and in Texas,
Did that on purpose.
we have a big conservative grassroots, and the grassroots, I think, appreciates how important criminal justice reform is. It's important, from the standpoint of just someone commits a crime and they should, pay society. They should obviously pay back any, restore anything that they've damaged, make restitution if necessary. But 95% of them are going to come out and be our neighbors. And so we can prepare them to be better citizens, or we can let them just go in like we're doing now, generally, not as bad in Texas as some states, and prepare them to be better criminals. So I think the grassroots gets that. It's sometimes kind of the squishy middle that they're okay with things just like it is. Why do we want to mess with it? Why fix it? But all of the conservative reasons that criminal justice reform is so important, the grassroots gets it.
Well, I was talking to Mark and appreciated some background that you gave, and you have too many former prosecutors as friends. I mean, can you have that and actually be engaged in criminal justice reform?
Yeah, as my friend Trey Gowdy and John Ratcliffe and I would go, and Senator Tim Scott, we would go to dinner quite often, and I would say, well, I'm not a lawyer, and Trey Gowdy would say, quit bragging. So yeah, I think 200 of those, Byron, in Congress, I think we've met our quota, right?
Dinner with Trey Gowdy is never going to be dull.
No, it's not. You have to survive the abuse, but absolutely. I think something that we can't miss here that's very important is this comes down to the family. The family is God's design. Doug, you talked about 95% of those that are incarcerated now will eventually return to society, 600,000 a year. Now, we know that nearly 60% or close to 400,000 will return. So what is it about conservatives? What's our role to make sure that day one that we can transition the man or the woman, a large number of times it's a father, it's a husband, back into that? Because here's the numbers. Here's what we know. 63% of all youth suicides come from homes with no father. 75% have some kind of a drug issue, and 90% of all runaways or homeless youth come from a family that's been broken. So as conservatives, do we not have some obligation to make that restoration, to do everything that we can? Now, the left, they have an idea. The left, they're finally getting on board with criminal justice reform. I helped in Congress with the Second Chance Act.
I mean, think about that phrase.
Yes.
They're finally getting on board. They've taken credit for it.
They are, but here's the difference.
Exactly.
Here's the major difference, is that the left is getting on board because they want and believe in the groupthink. They're trying to get this special class of people to all follow a more controlling, more dependent government. We as conservatives, we believe in that independence, and that's our ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and that's profound. That is profound, because if you look who's in the White House right now, and they spent decades impacting in a negative way our communities of color, using the laws as a sword, and that has done what? What did it accomplish? Mass incarceration without thought and policy or data to back it up. And now what are they doing? Oh, no. We're all for criminal justice reform. We fought against the First Step Act, but we're all for it now. Jim, I kind of wanted you to weigh in here after hearing this, because if you don't know Jim is responsible for a lot of people getting elected, a lot of conservatives, including one President Donald Trump in 2016. Right. Jim has seen more and is all over the country. I love watching his career unfold and seeing what he does. What are you seeing when it comes to the national dialogue of criminal justice reform and issues with conservative candidates?
I can't help but think back, and I'm showing my age here, but listening to the discussion here, and it was Joe Biden who on the Senate floor was talking about super predators,
right,
that we had to lock up and throw away the key. No belief in redemption when he was talking about that. And one of the things that we saw on the campaign, and it just happened naturally, and it was one of those very popular Donald Trump policies, was the story of Alice Johnson. For those of you that remember Alice Johnson last year when she was here at CPAC telling her story, if there was ever a story of redemption, it was somebody like Alice Johnson. And why was that story so important? Because you think about, okay, I've worked on campaigns where I remember George Allen's campaign back in the day, and it was 3 strikes and you're out. And then, by the way, right after that, you had a Democrat the next year, a conservative Democrat, Zell Miller, ran on 1 strike and you're out. But we've got to look at it from the standpoint of what is best for society. And if you see somebody like Alice Johnson and her story, and by the way, we found out that it was most impactful and persuasive to folks actually in the suburbs, believe it or not, as opposed to urban areas. We have a better society when Alice Johnson is out talking to people, letting her voice be heard, instead of rotting away in a prison behind bars.
Well, I mean, it's well said, and Alice is a friend to many of us, and I have spent time on the phone listening to her passion, and what is it born out of? It's born out of her faith, her devotion, and her belief that we can punish, but we can rehabilitate, and they can contribute to society. And let me just tell you, I'm proud of the work I did as a prosecutor. I prosecuted the kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart. It was President Obama that let me stay in. President Obama let me stay in to finish that case. And so there are people that you do have to punish and you do have to lock away because we know they will do horrible things. But for every one of those guys I knew or prosecuted, I knew 50, 60 that I knew if they could just get out and get an opportunity, get some education or job opportunity, they weren't going to commit a crime for the rest of their life.
What it's about is, and I say this all the time, and I travel the country, literally, meeting with governors and senators, state reps, and then we worked at the federal level on the First Step Act with Jared. And last year at CPAC, I came out and introduced Alice Marie Johnson, and got to speak a little bit about what does criminal justice reform from a conservative standpoint look like. And it's always we look at it through the lens of public safety. we never ever promote, and Alice would agree 100%, we don't promote anything that will endanger one single person. So it's about public safety, it's about, restitution, and then it's about, helping people become better members of society because they're going to come out. And if you look at it through all of that and then think about the Christian values that go with the redemption, it's just, it makes so much sense. And the money from a fiscal standpoint, we save a lot more money putting people out, becoming productive members of society, paying taxes, instead of paying to incarcerate them.
Let's get the breeze. It's something that you really brought up that's important. It's about making sure people come back and they're productive. Actually, I kind of started thinking about this space of policy in church. My pastor said something very important one day. It always sticks with me. He says, everybody in life is 15 seconds away from stupid. We all are.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
But when you're desperate, you're 3 seconds away from stupid.
Right.
And it's actually indicative of what happens with people. That when you're in a tough spot, a stressful situation, you're desperate, people do make bad decisions. But the thing we have to acknowledge, if you tour some of our state prisons here in the great state of Florida, by the way, but if you tour some of our prisons, what you'll see is that actually in the state-run facilities, the inmates are literally doing nothing. But if you're in the private facilities, they're actually getting different trainings, whether it's to get a CDL license, to get their barbering credentials, to get their carpentry credentials, construction credentials. Why is this important? Because at some point, what are we going to do? Give them $50 in a bus pass? As a good colleague of mine from the Florida legislature would always say, is that what we're going to do? And say, okay, now go out there. What do you really think is going to happen when they spent the $50?
Yeah. You're exactly right. And here's where the legislative part of that is so important. Because in many places, if you have a felony in your background, you cannot get an occupational license.
Right.
Occupational licenses are needed for HVAC workers, for plumbers, electricians, for barbers, as you just mentioned there. That's why it's so crucial that conservatives have an opportunity. I think it's crucial because the quickest way to create a conservative is to introduce them to the free market system. That's where the opportunity, that's where the prosperity comes from. Yeah, absolutely. That's why we should be passionate about this. And I think that we are, as conservatives, yes, we can be flamethrowers and we need to be. But when we leave that scorched earth, we have some responsibility to plant a seed, to cultivate that soil where the generation behind us can also understand these principles.
I learned a valuable bit of data last night, but I talking to some colleagues. But look, Utah just passed a bill, nearly unanimous. And it's so simple, it seems it's a no-brainer, and that is you can't use a mugshot until they are convicted. Guess who objected to it? Only one objection to the whole thing, mainstream media. Yeah. They came in with lobbyists and money and power, and they objected. Why? Because there are individuals who have preyed on those that are in the criminal justice system. That's right. And there are politicians who have preyed on those in the criminal justice system. To use them and inflate them into office, that's not the case anymore.
Yep. And one of the things we were seeing in our research, our polling, is, believe it or not, there was a significant segment of the electorate, especially in a lot of these close battleground suburban congressional districts, where they like Black Lives Matter and they love their cops, believe it or not. It was like 25 to 33%, and that was always a key swing group for us to be able to get, was those voters. Because what it was those are people where, what I would tell my candidates, they want you to keep them safe. It's one of the most important priorities of government, keep us all safe, but they want you to do it in a non-threatening and a compassionate manner that makes society better.
You see, I want to delve on that point because one of the things that gets caught up when you talk criminal justice, the assumption is that this is a black issue. Yep. It's actually not. When Amendment 4 in the state of Florida was going through, what we found was the vast majority, not the vast majority, but the majority of people in our state who were going to get their voting rights restored were actually white males who were convicted felons. It was not black males, it was white males in the state of Florida. They were the majority. And so when you look at what our criminal justice system actually does, on the other side, it breaks down all families, whether it's a white family, whether it's a black family, whether it's a Hispanic family. And you cannot continue a society like ours if you don't start with the formation of the family. So whether it is a man who is in prison or a man who is on probation, we got to find, or not so much we, the rules to the road, the pathway has to allow for it to be more easy for him to get back to his family. Because that not only helps him, it helps his children.
Exactly.
We introduced some legislation, still hasn't arrived, called Prison to Prosperity. I named it after a book. A guy there in North Carolina, Lynch Hunt, served 9 years, hard time. God did an amazing work in his life, and he talked about the aspect, prison to prosperity. What the legislation did was it created apprenticeships that when they are released, that day one, they have that job waiting. So it's not afterwards, because of those 600,000 annually that are released, nearly 400,000 return, and close to that number a year later do not even have a job. Yeah. So part of it, if we have a role in government, which is to reach out to all communities, all segments, black or white, then do we not have some responsibility to make sure that citizen has as much chance to be productive as anybody else in our society, in our culture? That's where I feel like we can make a
That's
difference.
right. That's right.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Representative Donald, I want to ask you. You not only share the same last name as the first name of our prior president, right? But you got to know him in a way. You got to know him. People often ask me. I'm interested on your point on this. How do you have the president who talks tough about being tough on crime, but at the same time, he pushed the First Step Act?
Oh, that's
he wanted Matthew Charles and Alice Johnson out, right? And so tell us why that is the future of the conservative movement in this country. How do you maintain both?
Because as much as, well, they're not all here right now, but as much as the guys that'll be in that stand tomorrow want to talk about him being rough and gruff and non-caring and not empathetic, the president actually has great compassion for all people. Coming up the way he did in the business world, he does. He actually has a lot of compassion for a wide array of people. When you're working in construction in New York City or frankly anywhere in our country, you deal with all kinds of people, their struggles, what's going on in their lives, the things that they're doing great, the things that are not happening well, and you have to find a way to work with all that. That's why I said at the very beginning, we want to be tough with crime, but you also have to be understanding of, frankly, the condition of the human being and realize that, listen, first of all, we've all fallen short of the glory of God. Ain't none of us perfect. That's number one.
Right.
But number two, everybody has the redemptive ability within them if they actually think and believe that the people around them want them to be redeemed.
Yeah.
Well, amen to that. I sat there with Doug Deason. We were in the White House. The First Step Act, the president's there. He's brought in, individuals that were just incarcerated, and he's interacting with them, and you can see genuine compassion and sincerity. My friend, who's a Democrat, leaned over and said, "Oh man, if the media showed this side of him, we'd be in trouble."
Oh, but they never do.
No, they're not
they'll
going to
never show that
it.
side.
Yeah,
But
they
and it
didn't show
applies
it.
to all conservatives, right? They don't want to show that.
Right, they didn't show it though. And of course, Van Jones was there, and at a lot of those meetings and a lot of the press conferences that we had with the president in the East Room, and it was fun to watch them kind of go at it. But the difference in the left and their movement is they want to, quote, end mass incarceration. So what does that even mean? Does that mean that there are no prisons, that we're not going to have any kind of judicial system, criminal system to try people, to punish them if they've done something wrong? I don't even understand what it means. And then there are always a segment of society who we're scared of. I mean, they're a danger to society. No matter what we do, they're going to be a danger to society, and they've got to be locked up. And we're pretty good at that. Unfortunately, California, New York, New Jersey, Harris County in Texas, they've started issuing PR bonds to dangerous felons. 97 people have been murdered in Harris County since 2018 who are out on either personal recognizance, PR bonds, or very low cash bail. Some of them multiple PR bonds, and they go out and they've murdered someone. And 97 people would still be alive potentially today if they didn't take that attitude.
Yeah, and the message there is balance. You have to have balance. And what I notice, conservatives will look at it and if they'll use the data and the research, they're not thinking about just an emotional reaction to a problem. I think of my friend Ken Volkmer, who's a county attorney in Arizona. He's a data nut, and he loves data, and he's gathering data. What has he done? He's reduced the number of felonies he's charged by 30-40%, but the data on the rising crime, no, it's going the other way. Why is he doing it? How is that happening? Is because it's a strategic application of our criminal justice system with the balance of understanding the human condition.
Right.
And like you said, Representative, but for the grace of God, we can all have a bad reaction in that 15-second period.
That human condition is something that Vice President Kamala Harris must have overlooked on her journey.
That's true.
If you look at her record, right?
Mark, you speak on this. I'm gonna let you speak on it. You go ahead. I'm gonna look over here.
Of course, I'm learning today that we're all 15 seconds away from doing something stupid.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
After 6 years in Congress, I think some have already crossed that threshold, but that's a different story there, right? But I do believe conservatives, the foundation of the way we look at this is that we look of all individuals are created in the image of God. And if that's the filter or the process or the perspective that we look at it, my father was a Baptist pastor, and as a young man, he served when I was a young man, he served as a chaplain at a minimum security prison. And I would go with him, literally sit on the bunk beds, and I would see those guys dirty, sweaty, crying, snotty. They would hug my dad, and he would love on them back. And that's what separates us. I'm not saying that the left doesn't care about the community, but what they care more about is control.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing even when in the discussion of criminal justice reform. It's not so much as a hopeful message as it is a dependency message. And that's why you want to see them with murderers and rapists and others get all the voting rights back. They want to control that environment. Conservatives, we can do both. We can push forward justice, but we can also provide compassion as well.
That's right.
Very true.
That's right.
Well said.
And one of the things that happens with the Democrats, they are so gosh darn political. With them, everything is about getting votes. When Donald Trump, to go back to follow up what Byron was talking about, when he did this because this was something he truly believed in. He believed in the redemption of people. And to follow up what you were talking about, Brett, in terms of if the media they would never show that side of him. But we saw it. You know where one of the places where we really saw it was during the RNC convention. Because after the RNC convention, he got a huge bump after that convention because they saw all these people from all walks of life, brown, black, female, that supported this president. And one of the big issues that they were all talking about was criminal justice reform. And you know what? Do you think Joe Biden can do this?
No.
There is no way.
No
He's
way.
just not capable of doing this. He can't do it. It took somebody like Donald Trump from the outside, or the ultimate reformer disruptor, to be able to do this.
Well, Jim, I'm gonna get a little political with you because this is where politics does come into play. If you have most of America truly believing now that free markets work, that there's a real propensity to build your life from nothing to something, that yes, you made major missteps in your life at some point, but we're able to, and I'm gonna use Joe Biden's phrase, build back better. If that is actually demonstrated in our country, then why in the hell would people vote for Democrats? Because then the proof is actually in the pudding that, you know what, we are the land of opportunity. And I think that as conservatives, this is an area of public policy where we can demonstrate that opportunity even exists when you're having to rebound from the worst spot in your life.
Yeah, that's right.
Well said. I'd just like to say that I think it's really important what the American Conservative Union, ACU, Matt Slapp, David Safavian are doing here. You know, that they're making this an important subject. Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk does, Candace Owens and Blexit. You know, a lot of conservatives are talking about criminal justice reform, and they're putting it, you know, on stage, on camera, in front of people, and it's getting a great reception. It got a great reception at the convention, the Republican convention. So it really is an important subject, and it's an opportunity that we have to own it as Republicans and to you know, take it to the nation.
my good friend from law school, been friends for now almost 30 years, is Senator Mike Lee. And we have both served together as prosecutors in the federal system, but he says that he is engaged in criminal justice reform, not despite being a conservative, but because he is a conservative. Right. Yeah. And because we've seen the criminal justice system. It is not, if you believe big government is inefficient in all other areas except the criminal justice system, you have a rude awakening when you actually pull up the curtain and look what's back there. Because there are aspects that are broken, and they will only get fixed if conservatives step forward and say, I will do that. Is it possible in Congress to still do that as a conservative, or is it so dysfunctional we're not going to be able to do it?
Something for 6 years that I made our staff and team answered was this question. Is it simply about making the argument, or is it also about making a difference? That's right. You see, in 21st century conservatism, I'll rank conservatism a little higher than republicanism. Either way you face it, we are challenged now not only to be conservative champions, but also to be bridge builders. That's the long game. That's the discipline. And we are going to be faced, every one of us, this great crowd here and all those watching at home, what's it going to take for us to engage to a place that we hold the line, we do not compromise on our values, yet we have a heart for our communities. You know, being a former pastor, let me give you the two greatest commandments, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, but love your neighbor as yourself. When we can look at this from a conservative filter perspective, realizing that we are called to be that conservative warrior, but also a bridge builder, we then can see great accomplishments, not just in Congress, but in the entire country.
Yeah, amen. You look at, and we got just a couple minutes left, but you look at a real tough issue, and that is reforming policing, right? And we saw what the Democrat solution is. You just defend it or defund it and walk away and see it's going to work. And yet, I saw Senator Tim Scott, for example, he drafted a bill. It had in there meaningful reform that Democrats have been trying to get, almost exactly the same as what they've been trying to get for years. Right. Nobody wants to do it. Why? Because it's like you said, they're political.
I've been in that place for 2 months now since I got sworn in.
How's it going?
Well, listen, the Democrats don't care about science or economics. They care about politics. Yeah. That's the only thing they care about. And so whether it was Senator Scott's bill, which was actually a very good bill that got drafted, whether it's that bill or anything else, if you actually sit down with them, kind of away from Nancy Pelosi, and you start talking through these issues in concrete detail, they actually agree with us. They're like, yeah, that makes sense, but I got to get reelected. And so, but there is real potential, I believe, going forward for us to actually do these things appropriately. Defunding the police is ridiculous. That makes no sense at all. Yeah. None. And we're not going to do it. I know we're not doing it in Florida. I know that for sure. But what does have to be acknowledged is that, are there room for reforms in policing? Yes. But the responsibility is actually not Washington. The responsibility are local communities. It is police chiefs. It is sheriffs. And the vast majority of them have already started that work without Washington playing politics with it.
That's right. There is, I mean, if you look at the fact that both sides are to blame for where we got here. Look, both were doing the one-upmanship, and they're passing more mandatory minimums because it was politically helpful. But there is only one side that cares now about fixing it. Right. And that's the conservative side. That's right. Last word, Jim.
And what it also tells you is, Byron is exactly right, and it's great that we got him in Congress because he gets it. Because the solutions are not going to come from Washington. They're going to come from places like Florida and our local communities. That's where it's going to come from.
Amen.
Amen.
Folks, thank you. Honor to be here with these gentlemen, and thank you for paying attention to this issue.